Congressman Dan Newhouse, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. And we're going to kind of jump right into it because I know I ate up a little bit of time just trying to get all my ducks in a row here. First, I kind of want to touch on the H-2A program. Recently,
Sure.
you put out a press release talking about the bipartisan coalition that you guys are working on. And it seems like this email and this legislation push came kind of on the heels of your committee hearing with Christy Noem, where you guys kind of talked about, it was about a month ago or so, where you talked about, you specifically talked about farm workers, the H-2A program, that sort of thing. So I kind of wanted to touch on how you felt about her answers on that. A couple of things that kind of jumped out at me is you asked her about if there was any way that, they would be carving exceptions for H-2A farm workers in this whole, immigration situation of getting all of those that are here illegally out. And she seems pretty dead set on anybody who is in the U.S. illegally needs to leave. But H-2A workers make up a pretty big chunk of the workforce over in our area. Were you unhappy with that answer? How did you feel about her answer of just saying, if you're here illegally, you just got to go?
So my effort all along has been to try to make sure that this administration understands the kind of I guess you could say, the predicament that agriculture is in. It's no secret that across the country, a large percentage of agricultural workers are probably here in the country illegally, or at least have documentation that is questionable. And making sure that the administration understands the important nature of these people in order to produce the food and fiber that we need in this country. And so my encouragement to them has been, certainly let's get rid of all of the bad people that we don't want in this country, all the drug dealers, all the criminals, all the gang members. Go for it, get them, every single one. But let's use some judiciousness, I guess, if that's a word, some strategy here. If we focus on the worst first, that gives us an opportunity to do some of the things that we're trying to do in Congress to allow those people that we need in agriculture and many other parts of our economy to work on ways that they can have a legal presence in this country, which is what we're doing. And to their credit, and I think Ms. Noem, Secretary Noem, recognized that distinction and knows that we are working on solutions. In fact, the president himself has made comments that are supportive of our efforts and the need to make changes in our visa program. So I'm encouraged by that. But we have to, that just tells me, and her comments tell me, that we have got to get our work done as soon as we can.
Gotcha. So you didn't necessarily feel that there was, because it kind of seemed like you were a little unsatisfied with some of her answers because she said early on that, we got to get them all out. But then in the same breath, you were saying that she said, at least, that we need to help our farmers and encourage them. How can we encourage our farmers if the main source of farm workers, the H-2A, because are getting kind of kicked out? I mean, Americans in general probably don't want to be working on the fields and doing all of the farm labor
That's
and
very
stuff.
true.
So if we don't have the workforce here in the U.S., does it kind of become counterintuitive to want to embrace our farmers if we're going to be removing all of their workers?
That's the tough spot we're in. We've got laws that don't necessarily match with the needs of our country right now, right? And so and I think the administration understands that predicament and has been supportive of us making these changes. That's why I think, with an administration that gets it, a House and Senate controlled by Republicans that are understanding the urgency that we have, largely because farmers and ranchers around the country have been communicating with their members of Congress. I think we truly do have an opportunity to fix this. But I can't be telling the administration, go ahead and enforce this law, but don't enforce that law. They're bound by what current law is, and we have to understand and recognize that. But there's an urgency on our part to make sure that the laws match and that we get this done soon.
Now, you've been working on this this H-2A program for a while now. You've been trying to do reforms, and I know it seems like every Congress you're trying to do something to try to reform from some of this. Are you worried that all of these efforts and in this latest bipartisan push may just be all for naught? It doesn't seem like over the course of your career, that H-2A program, that reform that you've been looking for has really gotten, some ground underneath it, some legs to stand on.
Yeah, well, If you look at most any issue, Dave, in Congress, it takes a while to build not only the momentum to get something done, but to raise the level of education. The members of Congress across the country, not everybody represents an agricultural district like I do, and so not everybody understands this to be a huge important issue. So it takes time to build that up, and then members of Congress change. You have to start all over again. So it takes time. It takes time to get bills turned into law. And I'm not pessimistic at all. I think we have a huge opportunity with this current administration in office. People, the president, and those that work for him understand that we have to get this done. So, it may look a little different than what the final product may look different than what I'm proposing today in this legislation. But I'm optimistic that we can get something done here. The agricultural industry demands it. With the labor issue just keeps getting worse, and we have the bottom line is, and you said that Americans are not willing to do the work that we need on the farms and ranches around the country. We need these people in order to produce the food and fiber that this country needs, and so it's absolutely imperative we do this.
And we're coming up on harvest season as we speak.
Yeah,
It's right around the corner. So as we head on into it, right now we read a story this morning about farmers, at least in Franklin County here, aren't seeing a whole lot of the I guess an impact because of the immigration enforcement. But it stands to reason that eventually it'll catch up to us if we have those workers here in our area. So as we head on into the harvest season, do you have kind of a timeline of when you want to kind of move this bill forward? I know right now the reconciliation bill has kind of been top of mind, but and the goal for that is to get out by July 4th to be on the president's desk. So do you have any goals or at least timeline goals for this, your H-2a program?
Yeah, cherries are being picked now in places, and that'll be ramping up, and then a lot of things are coming on soon. And you're right. Congress has been kind of all in on this reconciliation bill. That's where all the attention has been focused. Just introducing the Farm Workforce Modernization Act within the last month. I don't have a timeline specifically, but obviously the sooner the better. The faster we can get this done, the better off we'll be in the agricultural world. But it's going to take a little time. We still have some work to do in the Senate. Getting people lined up there. So my prediction is it will probably, if any, be toward the end of the year or probably into next year before we can actually get this to the president's desk. But we're going to keep working as hard as we can to move that timetable as quickly as possible.
Gotcha. Jumping, kind of piggybacking a little bit off of something you said earlier, where you said that, the bill is going to receive changes. It may not be the exact bill that you put out there that you introduced. So obviously, as the bill works and makes its way through both chambers, there is going to be some changes to that. And that kind of segues me to what I want to talk about now with the budget. Obviously, it's in the upper chamber. It's going to receive some changes, where I'm hearing reports of things of significant changes, but I'm also hearing reports of, people are just trying to take a look at it and kind of gauge the situation. So, in terms of what's going on in the Senate, it's still a little bit up in the air, but I kind of want to ask you about how now that it's been a few days, it's been about a week or so since you guys have moved the budget out of the House and onto the Senate side of things. How do you feel about it? Do you feel it was a comprehensive reconciliation bill that does what you want and it does what you think America needs?
So there's a couple things that are pretty key about the reconciliation legislation that passed the House and is now in the Senate. A big part of it is extending the tax cuts that were put in place in 2017. If this bill does not pass, Americans are looking at the largest tax increase in history. So just that one point of loan puts a lot of pressure on members of Congress, both House and Senate, to get this done. People don't want to pay more taxes. We hear that message loud and clearly every day. And then another important fact about this bill, that this, in the history of Congress, in the history of our country, this will be the largest tax decrease, or excuse me, spending decrease that we've ever seen. About I think the number is $1.6 trillion spending decrease, which, as you know, we, on an annual basis, the federal government spends about $2 trillion more a year than they take in. We have about a $36 trillion debt. Both of those things tell me that this is not a sustainable path forward for the federal government. We have got to make some difficult decisions and make some huge changes in how the federal government operates. And this bill, it's big. Some people call it beautiful. It's a step. It's a step in the direction of getting our fiscal house in order. So I think when everything else, there's a ton of things in this bill that complicate it, make it very, very difficult to understand. It's a long bill, a lot of things in it to read. But the bottom line is there's some very important tenets of this bill that are necessary for our country to be successful into the future. Now, there's going to be changes made in the bill. The Senate has to leave their mark on it, and they will. They'll probably tweak almost every segment of it. But I think the basic, extending the tax cuts and reducing spending, those things are going to remain.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up something I wanted to ask about because, the tax cuts, 3.75 trillion in tax cuts and then a 1.3 trillion in reduction in in spending. Is that going to be much to move the needle? I mean, the Congressional Budget Office says over the next 10 years, this bill is going to add to our deficit, some $2.4 trillion over the next 10 years. Are we actually moving the needle in fiscal responsibility, or are we just kicking the can down the road with these tax cuts and spending cuts? Because we're not necessarily still bringing in that revenue.
So interestingly, the Congressional Budget Office, they have to work on the parameters of what is current law. So they're assuming, Dave, and this is very important, they're assuming that the tax cuts that were passed in 2017 are going to expire at the end of this year. They do not make the assumption that we will renew them. So they have to work on the premise that those tax cuts go away and that the government would then increase the amount of revenue coming in because of that expiring tax cuts. We believe that if we extend those tax cuts, sure, that's going to reduce revenue to the government, but that will keep money in people's pockets. That will encourage a stronger economy, and that the benefits of that, and we saw some of this after the 2017 bill passed, the economy was on fire. Until COVID came along, we saw the largest economic boom in this country than we'd seen in a long, long time. So we're really kind of measuring two different scenarios here. And that's why there's a disagreement between the Republican position and our prediction of what's going to happen and what the Congressional Budget Office is predicting. And they have to, by law, they have to follow what will currently happen, not what might happen.
Gotcha. Okay. So, so you definitely feel it's going to move the needle in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, this is a step. This is not going to solve all of our fiscal spending problems in one bill. But this is a very important step to curb the spending, the deficit spending that we currently employ every single year. So I think it's very important, something that we have to do. Along with that, though, let me just say there's a tremendous number of very difficult choices that have to be made in order to do this. Nobody likes to reduce spending in any program that's important, and every single program has those people that advocate for it, that think we have to have it. But so there's some really difficult choices that have to be made. But this is a process. Like I said, the Senate is making their changes and discussing, debating what they should do. They're going to send a package back here to the House. And we'll have to come together between the two chambers on a final product before anything goes to the president. So this is a step in a very long process.
Do you think when the bill comes back, are you going to see any changes to the cuts in Medicaid spending? I mean, the reports are out there saying that it's going to cut, almost 10.9 million people off of Medicaid. That's more than the population of Michigan and 49 other states or 41 other states. And it's, more than the population of like the smallest 10 states. That's a big chunk of the population. Are you worried that that part of the bill is going to see any changes? And what kind of changes, if to that area, would you like to see?
So, like I said, the Senate's probably going to tweak almost every part of this bill. So my guess is there's a lot of advocates for the Medicaid programs, and I think that there probably will be some changes. I can't tell you to what extent they will be, but what I want to see happen is to make sure, because we have a lot of people that utilize Medicaid in Central Washington. You probably know that, but almost 40% of my constituents do. It's an important program. It really is. And my goal has always been to make sure that those people that need Medicaid, that this program is available to them. If we don't do anything, the Medicaid program as we know it is at risk of failure. We will not be able to provide the necessary medical attention to the people that really need it. And I want to avoid that at all, if at all possible. So that's why some of these difficult choices have been made. I think the Senate is going to, the process is set up in order to perfect legislation. You probably have heard that term. Whether it's perfect or not, that's another argument, but to make it better. And I think that's what's going to happen as we move forward.
Now, part of this Medicaid change comes with work requirements for folks that are going to be on Medicaid. Do you know, can you kind of paint us a picture of what those work requirements would be,
Sure.
or whatnot? And how are you worried that those work requirements could kick some of your constituents off of Medicaid?
So the Medicaid work requirements, if you're between, I think it's 18 and 64, and you're able-bodied and you don't have kids, that you would be required to do one of three things: either work a minimum of 20 hours a week, go into some kind of training program, go to school to provide an education so that you're employable, or provide volunteer services to some organization, some effort in your community. So people have some leeway there on how to satisfy that requirement. And so, the Medicaid program was set up for those people, for low income, disabled, elderly. There's a group of people in our country that absolutely Medicaid we have to have available to them. It was not set up for able-bodied, working-aged adults without children. If those people are taking advantage of Medicaid, they're essentially taking a spot of somebody that actually qualifies for the program. So I think, we're a country that honors work. We encourage people to be engaged in their community, to be productive citizens, not taking advantage of government programs and precluding those that need those programs from getting those services. So it may reduce the number of people in those categories that shouldn't be on the program, but there's other options for them if they are contributing to our communities.
You use the word able-bodied. Is there kind of a definition into terms of what defines an able-bodied person, or is that kind of one of those situations where it's a case by case?
I think generally, Dave, if you look at people that are physically able, mentally able, not disabled individuals, that they would be classified as able-bodied.
Okay. I did have one more question related to a section of the bill that I heard that was kind of getting talked about a little bit. It's section 70302, the restriction of funds. Folks are saying it's going to weaken the judicial system, the judicial branch, because it gives the administration a way to get around contempt of court orders if like a bond isn't established, which doesn't happen often in government cases. So are you aware of that part of the bill? And is that something that concerns you, if giving, a president a way to get around court orders?
So I can't speak very well on that subject. Let me look into that. I'll get back to you. But certainly not by characterizing it as a way for the president to get around court orders. That sounds like a red flag to me that we probably should take a hard look at, but let me do some looking into that particular part of the bill.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 1,100 page document. It probably took you quite a while to go through. Kind of paint me a picture. How do you go through a bill that size? What's the procedure there?
Well, we've been working on this, since March of last year. There's a tremendous amount of, I can't tell you the number of meetings and conversations and discussions and debates and that have gone into putting this bill together. It's a lot of give and take. There's 435 people in Congress. The number of Republicans, half of that, have been meeting constantly over the last year and a half to try to come up with a package that is acceptable to a broad spectrum of individuals, which is not easy to do. As you know, we only have a couple vote majority, right? And so it's something that everybody has a say in. It's been an exhausting process, but a thorough one. And I think that we've landed on something that like I said, not perfect, but addresses the needs that we need to address right now. I'm certainly looking forward to see what the Senate does, as they perfect the bill. And then as we go further into the process of the conference process, that we can meld the two versions together and come up with a package that can be signed by the president into law.
Okay. All right. I did have one last quick question, kind of just a for the record kind of question. The bill got through the House pretty quick, at least from your committee to the Rules Committee onto the House floor and then over to the Senate. Got through in about a week and a half, so moving pretty quickly. We're hearing reports of some representatives who didn't even read the bill, didn't even know what was in the bill. For the record, did you read the entire bill, and are you kind of at least knowledgeable on the majority of the bill?
Oh, absolutely. And I think most members of Congress are, like I said, we've been working on this for about a year and a half. It's gone through a lot of changes, as you can imagine. It's a lot of moving parts, but and it's difficult to keep that large a bill of everything top of mind and know specifically about every sentence in the bill. But no, I think that most members of Congress have a pretty good handle on what's in the legislation. But even as we speak, it's changing, right? So that's the problem, is keeping up with all of the final changes, because it's a very dynamic process, as you can well appreciate. Now we've got the Senate working on it, and there'll be a bunch more changes. So stay tuned. We're all staying as abreast, as closely to it as possible, so that we know exactly what decisions we're making when it comes back to us.
Gotcha. I just had one more question that popped in my head, and then I'll get out of your hair for the day. I know last year we kind of talked about the single subject bills. We know there was like a little bit of an argument with the Matt Gaetz crew about single subject bills. This bill has a lot in it, a lot of subject. I know it's a reconciliation bill, but after this goes through, are we expecting to get back to those single subject spending bills?
I think, by and large, most legislation would fall under that category. That's, you like my Farm Workforce Modernization Act, you're not going to find a lot of anything to do with the medical industry or law enforcement or other things in that. That's typically how legislation works. Reconciliation is different. This is an opportunity during each Congress where you can make some of these changes that doesn't have to follow the typical rules in the House or the Senate, particularly in the Senate, where they typically need 60 vote majority. With reconciliation, they just need 51 votes. And so that's where we can put some of these things in that might be different in a different outcome under the regular rules.
Okay. All right. Congressman, I'm kind of all out of questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything that didn't come up in the conversation?
I think we covered a lot of stuff. I would just encourage people to stay tuned. This is fluid. It's very dynamic. Changes are being made as we speak, like I said, and we'll do as much as we can to help communicate to people what's going on so that they know, and we'll continue watching and make the best decision we absolutely can.
Gotcha. Alrighty. Do you plan on coming back to the district to do any town halls at some point?
Well, as soon as you finally let me off the air, I'm going to be heading to the airport at some point here soon to be able to come home this weekend. And yeah, in fact, we've got one planned here very soon.
Okay, right on. Super. Congressman, appreciate you bearing with me on all the technical difficulties. Again, always a pleasure to chat with you, and I look forward to the next time we get to talk.
Thank you, Dave. Always look forward to talking with you.